Hi everyone and welcome to the Colour Cave. My name is Jem and today I'd like to welcome you in the first of a series of videos in helping you to get drawing if you are a beginner. This is in no way meant to be a concise and all-encompassing drawing course. People pay good money for that. But what I did want to do is a series of short videos on some of the basic steps and cornerstones of pencil drawing to help you get started if it's something that you are new to or want to try out. So I hope that you will share in this journey as I add to these videos over the coming weeks and months. There will be a full set of 12 by the time we are finished, and it just looks at some of the basic principles and things that will really help you to get going and get that skill level up as soon as possible. Pencil drawing is a really important part of most art because it underpins all of the basic techniques that you need for any type of artwork, like shape, form, light sources, and measurements and scale as well. So let's get to top down view and we're going to jump straight in today and we're going to put pencil to paper. Let's get going. So the idea behind today's video is really just to get kick-started and get drawing as soon as possible. I will be going into a little bit more detail about the sort of theoretical side of things as we go along and progress through this series of videos. But today I really just want to get you all started and actually putting pencil to paper. So the first thing we're going to talk about is supplies. And today's supplies are very simple and very limited. The first thing you need is something to draw on. I have got a cheap A4 sketch pad here. This one's from Flying Tiger, which is one of my favourite shops, and this is nothing fancy. Even if you just have copier paper or even like notebook paper, absolutely fine. As long as you're able to put a pencil line on it, that is all you need for the time being. The other things that I've got here are, I have an HB pencil, so this is a standard, like sort of school supply, just common or garden pencil, also known as a number 2 pencil. So just grab whatever you've got, it doesn't matter at this stage as long as you've got something to draw with. A sharpener, again any old pencil sharpener as long as it puts a point on your pencil. I've got this little Derwent twin hole sharpener which kind of just like sits on my desk, so I use this for lots of things, not just for art. And lastly, an eraser. Again, anything you have lying about, or if you want to go and pick one up, pretty cheap. This is a plastic eraser, and the likes of the Staedtler Mars plastic erasers, they're like 50 pence or something and they're great. So the only test for whichever eraser it is that you're going to use is that it is going to lift the graphite and it's not going to leave black smudges on your paper. So if you put down a little bit of graphite on the paper and you take your eraser to it, as long as that is taking that away, then your eraser is entirely suitable. If you are a parent, go and raid your kids' school supply stash, you'll find something. Now naturally you're going to be desperate to start drawing something straight away, and that is called enthusiasm, and we all have it for something. So what I want to do today is focus on 2 sort of core techniques. I'm not going to sit back and tell you as a new artist what you should and shouldn't be drawing. I say draw whatever you want, but just be aware of your skill level and the expected outcome. So the 2 main areas I want to concentrate on today, the first of those is pencil pressure. And this is a really, really important part of learning to draw. So the first thing you have to do is find a position that's comfortable for your hand, and I will talk about different pencil grips. Again, we'll do that later on. I just want to get drawing today. And what I would like to do is show you the exercises. Oh, there's that boring word already. But you can incorporate these into anything that you draw, and that's why I'm saying to you at this point, draw whatever you want. I will make recommendations and things, but at the end of the day, if you're not motivated to draw something, you're less likely to stick at it and keep practicing and keep learning. So once you've got a comfortable position to hold your pencil in, just whatever feels natural to you. Most of us have been holding a pen or a pencil since we were really small, so just go with your gut, it's fine. So the first thing to talk about is what pressure is actually going to do to your pencil lines, and it is so important. So we're talking about making lines on the paper here. So if you hold your pencil really lightly and just go back and forth and draw a line, you're going to get this nice sort of soft feathery line. And then progressively, as you press harder, that line changes, and it changes in so many ways. The thickness of the line changes, but also how dark the line is changes too. So that's something that we want to bear in mind, and that is a really simple exercise to do, is to practice the different pressures and be able to recognise in yourself what for you personally is a light pressure and what for you personally is a very hard pressure, and that is going to differ from person to person. An example of that is the fact that I have an old hand injury. I had surgery on, unfortunately, my dominant hand, and my grip strength isn't that great anymore. So what is a heavy line for me may only be a medium pressure line for someone else, and it's really important that you start recognising the difference in those pressures as quickly as possible, because that is really going to help you later on when you come to shading things, and also when you want to start playing about with your line widths. So in its simplest form, this is the exercise: super light pressure, medium pressure, heavy pressure. Okay, you're not going to want to sit and do that a million times over and over on a sheet of paper, because that's not interesting. But what you can do is, if you think about any sort of shape at all, just be mindful when you start to draw something. So if we're going to draw a square, you could have a really light line, you could have a slightly heavier pressure again, and then your bottom line could be as heavy as you can press. So that's a really simple exercise for you to do, and you can do that while you're sitting doing other things, as long as you're aware that which side should be which pressure. And there you go, you've created a little design, and then you could start to doodle in it if that's what you want to do. So you can apply that to anything. The other way to test your pressure is by having a continuous line rather than drawing straight individual lines, and this is a great exercise as well, and I highly recommend this not only to people learning to draw but colourists as well, using coloured pencils. And that is to start as light as possible and just keep your hand going back and forth, left to right, and as you start to come down, do you want to gradually increase that pressure. And the idea behind this exercise is to keep the pressure constant, but also not to have any obvious divides in where you've changed your pressure, to give you this sort of gradient effect. So I've really mashed the pencil into the paper here down at the end. And this is a really good way to learn to vary your pressure when you're working on a piece. So even if you wanted to go back over to your boxes here, you can see these are my two darkest lines here. So you could start with your really light pressure up here, and as you come down your box that you've drawn, then you can start to get heavier and heavier and heavier. And aim to have you pressing at your heaviest by the time you get to the bottom corner of your square. Okay, so that's two main ways that you want to play about with your pressure and start to recognise the different shades that you're going to get if you press a certain way down on your pencil. So what we want to incorporate that in with is learning basic shapes. Now this is something else that's really important. As a new artist, you have to practice geometric shapes, because it is going to be so helpful when you want to start drawing more complicated things. So there's a couple of like really straightforward exercises that I recommend, and I've actually talked about one of these in a video before. The first one is circles. Now, drawing a perfect circle, I can't draw a perfect circle, and I don't know truthfully how many artists that actually can draw a perfect circle first time without the aid of a compass or whatever. But what you can do is get your hand and your arm used to making a certain movement, and what that does is makes it a little bit easier, and as you learn to control that movement, you will find it takes you less and less time to draw something that looks more circular, and you will have more control as you do it, so it becomes easier as well. And the simplest way to do that is to find the position that's comfortable for you, and what you want to start doing is moving your hand in a circle. And it doesn't matter how big or small the circle is just now, but just get a feel for that movement. You know, I always pretend that I'm rubbing moisturiser into my skin. But if you can get a feel for that, and then gradually just let your pencil touch the paper, and just let it go round and round and round and round. And you can see there, if I zoom in a little bit now, you can see that my most of my lines that I've made there are actually quite neat and stuck together, but I've got this outlier here. So that was at the beginning of me making the circle. So I was basically just getting my hand-eye coordination in. And then once you have a circle like that, when you're actually drawing something, you can just rub out those wayward lines and you're left with more or less a pretty good circle. So we want to continue on with that, and this is a drill that I highly recommend. I'm not really one for doing repetitive exercises myself. I find it very boring and I try and incorporate them into other things, but drawing circles is a really, really good one. So what you want to do is just repeat what you've done, but maybe change the size of the circle. Do big ones, small ones, and just really get used to that action. And really what we want to do is, if I just zoom out a little bit more, you want this movement to be coming more from your elbow rather than from your wrist, because that's almost like you know, like you're steadying yourself on your elbow. If your elbow or your shoulder are your anchor points, then you're going to get a much steadier circle than if you go by your wrist. So try and keep your wrist quite firm when you're doing it. I find that when I'm sitting down, it tends to come from my elbow, and when I'm standing up, the movement tends to come all the way up from my shoulder. So that's something for you to think about, but I don't want you to worry about that just now. But I just wanted you to see what I mean. If I draw a circle from my wrist down here, I'll try and do a bad one to show you. But if I go from my wrist, then you've got that sort of wobbliness, and you're going to find it really difficult to get that consistency. Whereas if you go from the elbow and you try and keep your wrist still, you're going to have a much steadier line to work with, and it's going to work a lot better for you. And if it feels better for you, you can always anchor your elbow on the table as well and think about it, you know, like you're doing the robot dance. And try and keep this part of your arm rigid when you're starting these circles. And it really is just a case of practice. Once you're quite comfortable making that motion, you might want to mix it up a bit, and you can start with, you know, maybe going into more ellipses, so like more oval shapes. And that's going to give you a good variation. The more often you do this, the smoother these lines are going to become, and the more confident you're going to be putting them down. And again, don't just waste your circles. Use those circles for practice with your pressure as well. And again, these are great for this, because you've got a nice wide open space to work in. And you can mix it up. You can go the other way. You can start as heavy as you like and try and lighten the pressure up. And this is all about getting to know your hand and getting to know what feels right, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and what you're capable of. So the other two shapes I recommend doing as a sort of exercise is your four-sided shapes, so squares and rectangles. And something that I did from when I started drawing was I tried to draw these things without the aid of a ruler, and unless I'm drawing something that's quite precise, I tend not to use a ruler to draw a straight line, and that's quite a heavy discipline, and you don't have to do that. But once again, it helps when you're learning to draw lines. It really helps to coordinate that hand and discipline your eye as well in learning to create lines, because the more control you have over this pencil, then the easier and better your drawing is going to get, and it's going to get like that more quickly. So you want to use reasonably feathery strokes. When you're drawing out shapes like this, you don't want to be using your really, really hard pressure, because if you make a mistake, it becomes very difficult to erase this. And I'm just going to give you a demonstration here on these original lines. If I take my eraser and I go through this first set of lines, you can see that on the first line there's hardly any smudge from the graphite, whereas when you come down here you can see where the eraser's pulled the lines away. You will not always be able to erase all of your darkest line, because you're actually making an indentation in the paper as well, and when you go back over that, the graphite will go into that indentation. So when you are sketching to begin with, you want to keep your lines nice and light, and that way, if you say you make a boob and you think to yourself, well, that looks a bit off, I need to rub this out. When you go to erase that, you're going to have a much easier time of it, because the harder you press on the paper with your eraser, the more likely you are to damage the surface of the paper, which renders it not as useful for drawing back onto afterwards. So light pressure is good when you're practicing these shapes. And I like to go with light feathery strokes. And you can do that as many times as you like as well. Remember to mix these up too, so before you start drawing these squares or these four-sided shapes, have an idea in your head of what you're trying to achieve. So I'm going for roughly a cube shape with these ones, but let's say I wanted a really long and skinny one. Well, I know in my head what that's going to look like, so I'm going to have two short sides and two really long sides. Like this. And the third shape is the triangle, and again just the same sort of exercise, but you can vary again the types of triangles. So you can have, you know, try your equilateral triangles, and they will look wonky to start with, I can promise you, until you learn to gauge distances with your eye, which will come later on. It can be very difficult to get something that's almost equilateral, but as long as that's what you're heading towards, remember you're right at the start of your journey here, so it's important that you have something in your mind's eye and try to work towards it. You're not trying to get it perfect. And even to this day, like, I have good days and bad days with stuff like this. So it's really, really important that you bear that in mind. Do not get disheartened, but the more you practice these, the better your pencil control is going to be, and that's what we want for when it comes to proper drawings. So there you are, 2 key areas to focus on if you are new to drawing. So for those of you that want to play along and you know, want to kind of keep up with all this, here is a little exercise for you to do and practice. I want you to draw a line of circular shapes using the techniques that we've just talked about, and make them in any direction you want. But the main thing is to get this practice in of this nice smooth circular hand motion. I then want you to do a row of triangular shapes, and again this is just to get your practice in, and have them every which way. You know, they don't all have to be equilateral triangles as discussed. Let's have an isosceles in there just for fun. So nice light strokes, make sure that they're joined up at all points. But when you're doing these, make sure that you have the idea in your head of what this particular one is going to look like, because that's, you need to be aiming to draw what's in your mind's eye, and this is a really nice way to start it. So the next one's going to be an equilateral triangle, and then your next row down I want you to do four-sided shapes. With the four-sided shapes I recommend doing a row of cubes and then a row of rectangles. And what you will find is, just as your hand warms up, you get better and better at it. Your first couple might be a little bit wonky, but as you get your eye in, they should get neater and neater. So you do your row of cubes and then a row of rectangles. Now there you go, my first one wasn't very good there. I'll do one facing this way. And again, this is the chance to practice the straight lines. Yeah, I have a diagonal one in there as well. So do this all the way along. Once you've practiced a page of these, then use these to explore your pencil pressure. So this is a great way of putting the two things together that we've been talking about over this video. So try going from dark to light and the opposite way around, from light to dark. And then switch the direction, don't always shade in the same direction. So you maybe want to try this way and really explore that pressure that I was talking about. With your triangles, you can do it in the line style we were talking about. So you can start with really heavy lines and work up to really light lines. And again, make sure you switch direction when you're doing this. You don't want to always be going in the same direction. We want to be as fluid as we can possibly be with these exercises. And you can fill in all of your shapes, practicing your pressure. You can even do curved lines as well. If you're quite comfortable with this sort of thing already and you've got the hang of it, start doing it in curved lines, because we're going to have to get used to this motion as well. So really, this is like an exercise in limbering up your hand for drawing. So I hope you have fun with this, guys. I want to thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope this has been helpful, and we shall see you in the next video. Bye for now, everyone.